wildfire mitigation. We want to be helpful partners to the Speaker and his team in preparing our state for any future disasters. If the state needs an example of how to be prepared, they should be looking to San Diego, who has done an exceptional job over the last decade investing in things like vegetation management, reducing forest overgrowth, and acquiring water conservation technologies such as Healy hydrants. The people of California deserve accountability and transparency, and our state leaders and agencies. We ask for a special session. Thank you.
Thank you, Assembly Member. And now a new member to our caucus, Assembly Member Carl DeMaio.
There are very few issues in California that can bring Democrat voters and Republican voters and everyone in between together, united. Californians today stand united, wishing the best to these communities for speedy recovery. But I also believe that Californians also stand united on a very important issue of accountability. Why were we not better prepared for this disaster? All Californians are asking that question. And if the media is not asking that question, every single cycle, until you get the answer, you're not doing your job. Part of convening a special session is not just to take up the common sense reforms that this caucus is offering on wildland fire preparedness and response. But the other important duty of a special session is to convene oversight hearings to demand answers to questions that the public deserves to know the answers to. Governor Gavin Newsom has been asked repeatedly by members of your colleagues in the media simple questions. Members of the public have chased the governor down to his car, asking him simple questions. He's given them nothing but evasion and, yes, frankly, dishonesty. I do not believe that we are going to get to the truth if we leave the investigation in the hands of Governor Gavin Newsom and other state and local politicians. That is why today my office sent a letter to President-elect Donald Trump, his senior transition advisors, his appointees as nominees to various cabinet departments, as well as the chairman of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee and the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. In my letter, I asked them for a federal investigation into a number of failures by state and local politicians on these fire disasters. Specifically in the letter, I asked that the president sign an executive order requesting the following agencies open investigations, both from a programmatic standpoint, but also potentially from a criminal standpoint. First, why do California regulations prohibit proper brush management by individual homeowners? And why do state and local government agencies fail to properly maintain public lands? Second, why was there inadequate water supply to fight the fires, both in the form of dry reservoirs and fire hydrants that could not properly service firefighters? Third, why does California have an insurance crisis that has gone unaddressed for the past 5 years as it has gotten worse? Fifth, the failure of government utility groups to shut off power properly well after the outbreak of the fires. And finally, the failure by local government to properly staff and manage its fire department. Now, there are other questions that are being raised that the federal government can weigh in on. But I do not believe that if we leave it in the hands of the governor, I do not believe that we will get honest answers. I'm calling on my Democratic colleagues. Our entire caucus would like to work with our colleagues to give answers to our constituents, to demand answers of state and local officials. The only way that can happen is if we have a dedicated, focused special session with committees tasked with doing proper oversight. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember. And next, my colleague, Assemblymember Diane Dixon.
Good afternoon. I'm Diane Dixon, representing Assembly District 72 in Orange County and the coastal and inland communities. As you're hearing today, we are frustrated. Time and time again, we have the same conversations in Sacramento regarding wildfires. And every time there is a wildfire, it seems very little actually happens to address the problem. How many more times must we have the same conversation when it comes to mitigating the potential for fires in our state? According to the data provided by CAL FIRE, 13 of the largest wildfires in California, 7 of the deadliest wildfires, and 15 of the most destructive in the state's history have occurred since 2015, in the last 10 years. Something must be done. No longer can we continue on this current course. Lives are being lost as we speak, and our hearts go out to the families and the victims of these fires, and our gratitude goes to those first responders from all over the country and other countries who are assisting California CAL FIRE in protecting our neighborhoods and dealing with these fires that are raging as we speak. Alongside the important measures that my colleagues have discussed today, there are a couple of further areas which I want to draw attention to. The first is that it is imperative that we increase aid to local communities and nonprofits which are providing essential services to their community members. Our local communities and nonprofit organizations are the front line when preventing and tackling wildfires across the state and dealing with the healing process and reestablishing life back to normal with members of the community. Too often communities are forgotten or left unprepared when a wildfire strikes. In particular, we must provide financial assistance to local entities for disaster costs when federal assistance is not available. We must provide them with the necessary resources to succeed. The second is we must streamline water projects that has been mentioned and address water needs within the states. According to the California Drought Map, there are currently 21.7 million residents in areas of drought. Currently, the state is unable to effectively capture and store excess water, which is so desperately needed. And I echo my colleague's comment about why was that reservoir in Pacific Palisades dry for over 10 years? Why were the fire hydrants dry? Imagine all these homes just burned without any addressing from the water mitigation. Currently, the state is unable to effectively capture and store excess water. There was a bond measure in 2014, $8 billion. Not a penny has been spent to build a reservoir. Been spent on a lot of CEQA-related costs, but not to build a reservoir. This is just, we're a laughing stock across the world. We can't get our infrastructure act together. Steps must be taken to reduce the time it takes to build much needed water storage and recharge projects, which not only provides a vast number of public benefits, but improves drought and fire preparedness. And speaking of time, all of us remember when the state has been, or areas of the state have been devastated by major earthquakes. Former governors have put a deadline and said the communities, the cities must be functioning within 18 months. Governor Pete Wilson had the freeway in Santa Monica Freeway in Los Angeles operating after it collapsed. It was open after 66 days. Where is the sense of urgency from our governor to mandate incentives to contractors and other participants in the cleanup and the rebuild? Where is the creativity to say, let's have a sense of urgency, which means now? Lastly, we need to reduce bureaucratic red tape for coastal fire prevention, especially regarding CEQA, as was mentioned. Despite any good intentions years ago with CEQA, we must take a common sense approach now when it comes to tackling fires. These are unnecessary and burdensome red tape that must be fixed. It is crucial we provide expedited permitting for wildfire projects and streamline environmental reviews, which incidentally, even before the fire, CEQA is preventing housing, affordable housing, from being built in California. We all know that these are unnecessary and costly delays, and we have to fix these regulatory problems and hindrances to our programs to increase housing and now to help people. I demand that the governor and legislature call a special session because the victims and the survivors deserve it. Thank you.
And then lastly, a new colleague, but who's already really working hard on solutions to this very issue and comes from an area that has been devastated by fire, Assemblymember David Tangipa.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining me. I want to speak directly to the victims, survivors, and those currently going through the issue that we see today. We and all of my colleagues that worked in such a fast fashion hear you. Some of us understand exactly what you're going through. Being evacuated, your properties, leaving it behind, your memories. 2018, my family lost their property to the Carr Fire. In 2020, I worked on the Creek Fire in Fresno County. We've witnessed it personally, and I want you to know that we stand here and we hear you. You deserve answers, but most importantly, you deserve action. Some of you are waiting, and now we are demanding that our colleagues in the legislature and our governor join us in calling a special session, because if you think about it and you follow the numbers, this is just beginning. We've got to get down to the bottom of it. There shouldn't be any more victims if we start taking action. We ask that you all join us and find the relief and the solutions needed to protect Californians. Californians now, Californians of the past, and those of the future. The last 8 of the largest fires in California's history have happened within 5 years. How many more do we need to take action? And we say no more. We ask that you join us. Be a collective group and fight for every single Californian, and for anybody who thinks that this is a partisan show. Fire does not ask your registration when it shows up at your door. Fire does not ask your registration when it burns down your house, when you leave everything behind. We demand action. We need action. Thank you for joining us today, and I know Speaker Gallagher is going to come up and join for some more questions. Sorry. Assembly Leader.
I like the sound of that. Well, no, thank you all for being here. And again, just to reemphasize that point that Assemblymember Tangipa just made, we want to be united on this front. It's important that we come together as a state to really get at the causes, the root causes of these fires. We don't want to go through this. We've been through this with our communities. We see the terror, the horror of barely escaping fires and the turmoil of recovering from these fires. We need to get to work in earnest, and that's why we need this special session. And we need to unite with our federal partners. We're going to need their help on many fronts in this. So to start off the year, should we gear up for lawsuits against our federal partners, or should we hold out our hand and say, let's work together and let's find real solutions to make sure that communities don't have to go through this? We can do better, and that's what we're urging today. So thank you for being here, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that folks may have.
Senator Gallagher, you guys can all submit legislation in the regular session. You don't get special session to do anything you're talking about. So is this just another way to call out the governor's special session on Donald Trump?
Well, certainly we will be introducing in a regular session as well, just like we have before. As I said, many of these bills have been presented before. We think these are solutions that need attention. But what a special session brings is special attention to an issue and real focus. And as Assemblymember DeMaio said, the ability to do investigations and to really weigh in on these issues, get to the bottom of them, get answers. And so that's where I think the urgency of a special session is really necessary. The fires that we were seeing, they really underscore it. Why are we not focusing on this issue? Insurance, it's been an issue for years now. And we've been talking about it, but where's the action? We can do that with this special session, and that's why I think it is warranted, and that's why we're here today.
Assemblymember Gallagher, Sally Calvados. So, you and your members have talked a lot about expedited permitting, streamlining review process. The state is currently suspending CEQA to allow for more accelerated rebuild, or at least the governor has talked about that. And when you talk about uncontrollable burn, when you talk about controlled burns in recent years, the state has taken actions to perform some of the controlled burns. So I was wondering, when you and your members introduce legislation, what further measures or what more in those areas can the state do?
I would encourage you that whenever you're dealing with the governor and what he's saying, read the fine print. Because what that streamline provides is not what I think he's saying it does, right? And oftentimes it's reviews by agencies to look at what they could do or what they couldn't do. We need action. And I can tell you, because I've been dealing with this issue for many years now, we don't have that when it comes to environmental review. We don't have an exemption for these projects. I mentioned Berry Creek was a great example. We didn't have an exemption from CEQA for that fuel reduction project that was already planned, they had already done the work to go do that project, and were stopped by our environmental laws. And by the way, they can't just be done by executive edict. They have to be done by the legislature. We're the lawmaking body. So there are policy changes that need to be done to actually help ensure that we can do this work faster and that we can increase the pace and scale of, for instance, fuel reduction in this state. Perhaps to help with undergrounding of power lines, which continue to be an issue of ignition, to help with hardening of homes. All of these things are things that we can do a whole lot more of, and they're not just done because of an executive order. Again, I'd urge you to really look at what that executive order really does, and I would tell you right now, we need to do a whole lot more.
Assemblymember Gallagher, do you guys have any ballparks for how much money you think you need to accomplish all of the things you're talking about?
Well, when it comes to fuel reduction, we need a whole lot more money. And let me just put it in context. I mean, we got $1 billion in 2021. We had to fight like hell for that. We had to pretty much damn near shame them into getting $1 billion into that. And you might remember some of those fights. At one point, the governor sheared it back to $500 million. We ended up getting $1 billion out of that budget deal. It's gone down since. That's a fact. There's been a lot of talk back and forth on this, but the fact is, we got $1 billion in 2021. It's gone back down to $200 million. There's been successive cuts to that. $1 billion maybe sounds like a lot, but it's not a lot when you consider that we spent $25 billion on homeless programs that don't work. I think that we need to make this a priority, and we need to really look at what is the cost, what is really needed to get to that, for instance, to that 500,000 acres a year metric that we said we were going to do, and we haven't done yet. Let's find out what that number is, and let's fund it. And let's work with all of our partners, from CAL FIRE to the grantees who have been doing a lot of great work, but we need to do a whole lot more of it. I mean, if you look at the grand scheme of the amount of fuel that is out there, because over decades we've done very little on that front, it's a big job, and it requires investment. And so yes, I think we need to make that investment, find out what it is, and figure out how do we remove barriers to that work.
Minority Leader Gallagher.
Yes.
You've been through this a few years ago with the Paradise.
I've been through it a
Fire.
couple of
Yeah.
few times now, unfortunately, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that part. Just want to know, because there's a lot of pain and a lot of hurt that's going on in Southern California. Other than just the funding, what else can be done, to kind of help these people, get on with their lives, because it's the next step in their journey.
Great question, and also, I'm mindful of Altadena, a historic Black community
Yes.
that is going through this. My heart goes out to them. I was just reading about some of the things that are going on there. That is also a big focus. How do we help people recover? We know there was a lot of people that were there for us in Paradise and the communities, Greenville, that Assemblymember Hadwick represents. And we can give you ways to maybe help people recover and ways that we can make improvement in that recovery as well. But I think that work needs to begin in earnest. How can we do the things that, from the government standpoint, but also working with nonprofits and others so that we can help make sure that nobody falls through the cracks. Because I can tell you there's so much devastation and heartache in the immediate aftermath of these fires. Caseworkers that are needed to help people not fall through those cracks, things like that I think can be done. We've done in the past. I'll highlight work that I'll commend the governor actually, with the Cal Volunteers program that was actually helpful to us in some of that recovery work, right? But these are all things that we need to be looking at as we move forward to help people recover. But again, we also need to get to those root causes so that we're not facing this again. And that is where I feel like we have just not done enough. And we haven't really gotten to the real root causes of these catastrophic fires in ways that we should begin to do in earnest right now.
When it comes to stabilizing the insurance market, can you give a few examples of what you'd be supporting, what you'd be willing to support? Would that include expanding the moratorium on non-renewals in fire-affected areas?
Well, look, there's a lot that needs to be done there. Insurance is a complicated issue, but what we've been doing is just kind of passively waiting. From my perspective, the legislature, the Democratic leadership and the governor have really done very little. We've been waiting on these emergency regulations out of the Department of Insurance. And look, first of all, part of the problem is our cost of living and the inflation and the cost that has driven up the cost of everything in this state, which makes things much more expensive to insure also. So by addressing cost of living, which I still believe is the number one issue that we need to address in this state, we can also help address the insurance crisis. We also need transparency, on the FAIR Plan, for instance, who, at least from our last reports, doesn't have enough assets to pay out these claims. And what is going to be the result of the FAIR Plan going under and assessments that may be made against all insurers in the state? We have insurers fleeing the state. And I'll tell you what's going to be really bad is when we don't have insurers and all you have is the government. That's not a good situation, right? So we need to, it's not like there's an easy path, but again, a special session where we really come together and bring all the stakeholders and begin earnest in work on this, I think we can come up with solutions. Yeah, Carl.
I'd like to connect your question with hers. I want you to ask the governor this next time he may float through, for his appearances. $3.6 billion is the amount of tax revenue that the general fund receives every year from a state tax on every insurance policy in the state of California. At a time when insurance policies are doubling and tripling for some of our constituents, I'll be damned if the politicians get to keep a piece of the gouging. They should commit every penny of the $3.6 billion to fire mitigation funding. And by the way, if we went to the insurance industry and said, hey, we're going to take $3.6 billion and put it into fire mitigation, tell us where you want it so you can reduce the premiums. Tell us where you want it so you will continue to write policies in these areas. That's when we will save people their insurance coverage. That's when we're going to fund the mitigation efforts. And I will tell you this right now, when people say, how do you pay for it all? You either pay for it when it's properly paid for, or you pay for it in the form of a $50 billion loss, which is what Morgan Stanley now is projecting from the Los Angeles fires. $50 billion versus an investment up front and saving people the tragedy of losing their homes. I think the answer is pretty clear, and that is why we need a special session. We can't keep a focus on this issue for the next 3 or 4 months because none of this is going to happen overnight. But if we call a special session, it forces legislators to convene every single week, hold committee hearings, pass legislation, so that these victims know that once the media goes away, we're going to be held accountable for fixing the problem. The only way you do that is to heed this caucus's call that the governor has to call a special session.
And I wanted to piggyback on Carl's comments on that. This time is of the essence. If it can happen to LA in January, it can happen everywhere. And it will happen everywhere, especially if you follow this map and you see where the insurance companies are canceling, or the highest areas where Fair Plan is the only place that you can get insurance. You are in a high-risk area. So not only is this special session asking to address the issues that we have today, this is asking to address the issues of future Californians that are in danger. To the victims of the Creek Fire, the Rim Fire, the Carr Fire, the August Fire, the Complex Fire, the Lightning Fire. I want to stop naming fires, and so do we. So if you follow and you look at the data, if the insurance companies are leaving, it will tell you where the risk is at. Insurance is in the business of risk. We want to solve the insurance volatility, we handle risk. We have the ability to do so here at the legislature. The governor has an ability to do so for Californians when he calls a special session. This legislature has the ability to do so. Let's protect Californians because they deserve it. Because we don't need any more victims. This was preventable. They had the data. It's right there. Follow the data. Listen to it. Do the action that we need right now. Call a special session for the love of God.
Senator Gallagher, I want to ask you about federal aid that you were mentioning. Speaker Johnson today said that Congress is still hearing to tie wildfire aid to federal debt ceiling negotiations. What is your response?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say I'm actually really excited about this year, because you can see I have members in this caucus who are ready to get to work, and so that's really exciting, and I think we got some great opportunities. I will say, actually, Speaker Johnson reached out to me over the weekend, and he wants to work with us. He wants to work with the state on recovery. He expressed his compassion and condolences for everything that we're facing in this state. He knows, for instance, what I've gone through and my community's gone through. Let's remember, before we talk about any of this stuff, is that historically the federal government has come through every time, and specifically the Trump administration came through every time that we had a request to the federal government during a disaster. I went through it with Oroville Dam. Money came through. Governor Newsom was there too. He was making the requests. Camp Fire, all the fires that we faced, the Trump administration kept its word and came through. Now look, relief also, we can't continue to just provide relief and not talk about changes that need to be made, reforms that need to be made to make our communities safer and more resilient. My anticipation is that relief is going to come through, but we do need to act exactly what we're talking about here today. We do need to make changes here in California so that we reduce the risk and so that we don't face these kind of disasters again. There's not billions of damage that we need to provide the relief for at the end of the day, right? So I anticipate there's going to be a very good working relationship. You will see this Republican caucus have a very good working relationship with our congressional Republican colleagues and with Congress and the Speaker and with the President. And again, if we want to have that good working relationship, it's probably not a good idea to start off the year with lawsuits against the President who hasn't even taken the oath of office yet. It's time to come together, work together on this issue, and I anticipate that just like it was, back in the first Trump administration, when we had that cooperation, when we came through with that relief, it'll be the same. But it requires us to come together and work on real solutions and to have a cooperative attitude, not an antagonistic one.
To be clear, you're okay with the federal government attaching its rights to California's wildfire?
I want relief to come through for California, absolutely, but I am okay with us also talking about at the same time making changes here in California, which is exactly why we're calling for this special session, to help ensure that we don't have these disasters again. Again, billions and billions and billions of dollars have come through from the federal government to help California. Most of it for wildfire, all right? So there's been, and under Republican administrations, So this narrative that somehow Republicans aren't going to help California, first of all, isn't true historically, and I do not believe will be true when we go into this new administration either.
Mr. Minority Leader, it seems to me that they're going to continue with the special session, allocating the $25 million to the Attorney General and the other things that they announced over the weekend. So you're calling, though, for a new special session on fires, but also to remove the current one as well. Is that fair to say? Is that accurate? The current one going after Trump?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, I was encouraged that we found that they were supposed to do a hearing this week in the special session. Apparently it's delayed. That's a good thing. Let's delay it permanently. We don't need to have this special session. It is not the priority anymore. And clearly with Los Angeles and the communities on fire, it's time to shift focus. It's time to really focus in on this. I think we can all agree these are the big issues. And I think there could be some really good bipartisan work on those things, right? So yes, we would say stop this special session that is currently in place that the governor has called, and let's have this special session where we can really focus in on this issue, which is forefront.
Assemblymember Gallagher, so I wanted to go back to a previous question about stabilizing the insurance market. I know that you said it's tough to tackle this issue. I know that you said, we have to tackle cost of living and transparency. What are some of the concrete measures that you think your members will, bring up as or introduce as legislation to tackle this crisis we have?
Well, I mean, you heard some of the discussion already, from some of my members. I will go to my vice. Mr. Tangapa is actually going to be the vice chair of insurance, and we'll be working on these issues. But again, we need to start the work in earnest. It's been 5 years that we've known this insurance issue is looming. And what have you seen out of the supermajority? And what have you seen out of the governor? There's been no action taken. And we believe that we need to come together. Nothing's going to happen without people coming together and finding those solutions. We have our solutions that we want to work on. But again, we need a special session and we need focus on it.
So there's a lot of practical measures that we can do. Again, as I had stated, that insurance is in the business of risk. We mitigate the risk. Insurance companies will analyze and look at this. So when it comes to strategic thinning, strategic fire breaks, these are some things that we've actually already put together as platforms. And I would recommend that we, in this special session, look at this map. This map will tell us where the exposures are. The California FAIR Plan has $450 billion in exposure. Well, then let's look at it from a list of hierarchy. If the most exposure is right here, then let's address those areas. Let's also talk to the insurance companies and say, what are the necessary things that residents and people need to do that we can help streamline and make faster through these, whether it's permitting, expedition, or just handling a lot of these areas when it comes to free up the access. Cut the red tape, not only in Southern California when it comes to these areas, but cut the red tape for the victims of the Paradise Fire, of the Creek Fire, of the Rim Fire, because there's a lot of Californians asking right now, why didn't they get the same treatment? This fire doesn't even register within the top 25 when it comes to size. But in comparison, just a few years ago, a fire that burned over 1 million acres. And for people to think about that, the Palisades Fire is around 25 to 30,000 acres. The Creek Fire alone burned almost 400,000 acres. And again, if it's happening in January, what will June look like? What will July look like? And that's what the insurance companies are looking at right now. So this special session will allow us to assess the risk, come up with even more policies, but also look at the suggestions that we'd love to bring in the insurance commissioner as well, Carter Lara. We'd love to work with the partners because obviously they know something that either we didn't address here or somebody didn't look at and actually took the measures necessary for preventative action. So that's what we're asking for. So we do these and implement these strategies. We will balance the insurance market because we're assessing risk, and that's what we're going to be focused on.
To follow up on that, everything the insurers have been asking for to stabilize the market would increase rates for Californians. Are you all ready to tell your constituents that rates are going up?
I'm already having to tell my constituents that rates are going up. Their premiums are going up right now. And they're going up mostly because of the inaction by the governor and the supermajority in this legislature. So again, it needs work. And we should get to work on it. And look, we're not saying that we have the only solutions. We're saying let's come together as a body, as a legislative lawmaking body, the problem-solving body, of California, and let's get to work on those things, right? It's only going to get worse if we continue to let the status quo happen. Fair Plan is in a very precarious situation now in the aftermath of the Palisades fire. We have insurers that are continuing to not write policies or leave the state, so it needs action, right? And so I think that's really the point. And Mr. DeMaio brought up a good point. Why does the state getting $3.6 billion, out of some of these premiums, right? What are they doing with that money, and how could that money be better spent? These are all things that I think we should be looking into and finding better solutions for Californians. Okay, thank you guys. There will be people sticking around here if there's individual questions that people might have, but thank you for being here today, and we're looking forward. We hope that the governor will call this special session and we can get to work on these issues. Thank you.